Hey there. Sorry for the delay. Thanks for being patient.
Oh, it's all good. How you feeling, King?
Well, you.
I'm good. I'm good. First and foremost, I want to thank you so much for taking out the time to stop by. It's definitely an honor to have you on the platform.
Glad to do it, man. Glad to be of service.
Okay, okay. Now, for the viewers who may not recognize you, let them know who you are, where you're from, and definitely what do you do.
Yeah, my name is Marcus Collins. I hail from Detroit, Michigan. Strong product of the D. I now reside in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I teach at the Raw School of Business, University of Michigan. But I study culture and its influence and impact on human behavior. I get to talk about it in classrooms. I get to help brands and leaders navigate through it in boardrooms, and I get to evangelize its power through prose and on stage through speaking.
Wow, okay, that's cool. That's cool. Big shout out to Detroit. I'm from Cleveland. We got some family up there.
That's what's up. Yeah, it's like a sibling rivalry of sorts between Detroit and Cleveland. Like there's a lot of love, but there's a lot of elbows too.
Right, right, right. Okay, now what courses do you teach?
So I teach strategic brand management for undergrad students and MBA students, social media marketing and digital marketing specifically for undergrads. But I get to teach undergrads, masters, and executives about culture in all the many forms it takes. Typically through the lens of consumption by way of marketing, which is what I've done for so long as a practitioner. So it makes sense that that's where I'd sit. But I find my work the aperture of my work expanding, and therefore I get to have greater impact in the classroom beyond just marketing. So for executives, I teach a lot about learn about leadership, about organizational culture, and about transformation with regards to organizations as well.
Wow. Okay. Okay. That's definitely interesting. Now I can ask you this: when did you develop this passion for like marketing and culture? Was this something you've always been into, or did you kind of get into it later?
Not at all. At a young age, I wanted to be in music. I just didn't have any other aspirations beyond that. If you asked me when I was a teenager, I was going to be the fifth member of Boys to Men. Like that was my aspiration. Realizing that probably was not going to happen, I went to school to study engineering, where I found that as interesting as engineering was, I wasn't necessarily interested in that being a career. So I spent a lot of my time in the recording studio at the University of Michigan learning how to write and produce music. When I graduated from University of Michigan in material science engineering, I went straight to the music industry, much to my parents' chagrin. I was writing love songs for a living. Like that was what I was doing as a career. It wasn't terribly successful. We had some minor success, but nothing to the degree of what I imagined and dreamt of and hoped for. So I went back to school to study business because I realized that the work I was doing in the music industry was more about the business of music than it was the music. And I figured if I want to do this, that I probably should understand and have some acumen about with regards to how this operates. And I figured marketing was probably the most creative aspect or creative discipline within business. So I studied marketing, not realizing that the same things I loved about or I was interested about engineering were the same things that drove my interest in music and ultimately drove my interest in marketing. It's really about connecting with people. From an engineering perspective, I thought about carbon chains connecting to create polymers, plastics that we use. That was pretty interesting. As a musician, I was really inspired by the idea of people being moved and connected because of their shared affinity for an artist or song or sound or rhythm. The same thing that got me excited about marketing is that you can get people to adopt behavior because they feel connected to a thing. This idea of connection would be a long-standing motif in my career, even though it manifested in different ways. And once I realized that, I was able to sort of take all these different pieces and put them together like Voltron to really turbocharge my career in ways I hadn't even imagined it could.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Like you say, it seemed like you dibbling dabbling in a lot of stuff, and you just brought it all together. That's really cool. Now you was a columnist for the Forbes for a while.
Yeah, so when I wrote my book for the culture 2 years ago, I joined Forbes as a columnist for. I would write probably like every 2 weeks about culture beyond the the scope of my book, and much more in a contemporary fashion, like things that were happening in the world of business, in the world of politics, in the world of the social phenomenal world in which we reside. It just gave me an outlet to talk about culture and these new different manifestations, which I found to be extremely rewarding and, to my delight, actually helpful for folks, which is really what drives everything that I do.
Okay, okay. Yeah, you mentioned culture a lot. I love culture. I mean, I guess it's different aspects of it, but I'm a world traveler. I've been to 70 different countries. I've been to 45 states. Even within America, it's like you go from one state to the next state. The lingo is different. The weather is different. The food and cuisine is different. And I just find that so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think it's so powerful, that we all reside in, abide by, and identify with a culture. And the culture that we find ourselves invested in, what Emil Durkheim, one of the founding fathers of sociology, would call a system of conventions and expectations that demarcate who we are and govern what people like us do. This system not only sort of guides what we do in life, but it really forms the way life manifests in our through our senses, the way we see things, what we like, what we don't like, where we go, what we do, what we eat, what we listen to, how we adorn ourselves, who we date, where we work, how we work. All these things are informed by our cultural subscription. And the better we understand that, not only do we better understand ourselves and the world in which we occupy, but we also understand others, which helps us to connect. So, to your point, if you've been to Detroit and you meet someone from Detroit and you go, "What up, though?" People go, "What up, though?" Oh man, immediately you feel connected. That's the way by which we greet people. If you have an understanding of the music scene in a particular place, if you have an understanding of their, to your point, cuisine, it all helps us get a little bit closer because we get to realize and experience life through the lenses, through the senses of people who make meaning differently than we do. And I find that to be just a really humbling research trajectory, because what I'm really studying is humanity through the lens of the operating system that governs humanity. And its ramifications, its implications go far beyond marketing to how we work, to how we worship, if we worship, to how we engage in government, how we engage in civil unrest. All these things are governed by our cultural subscription. And the better we understand it, the better we understand us. And I feel like that's a worthy exploration.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Tapping into different cultures and make you kind of examine your own culture. Like, I guess sometimes when people travel, they may have culture shock. Like they say they go to another country, and they like, I got to get back home or whatever. But then sometimes you have reverse culture shock. Where you come back home and you like, oh no, you know what I'm saying? We ain't doing this right. You can
Yeah,
learn some things.
I think that's so fascinating, and it's a really profound observation that we can go to a place, experience their culture, and go, "This is cool, but it's not like home." But then you go home and go, "Oh man, like my conception of home isn't what I once thought." It's because our aperture has widened. In the my book for the culture, I mentioned this in the epilogue, that when we are engaging in social life, we're observing social living. It's sort of like watching a basketball game, where the game itself is the phenomenal social world in which we live. But if you have courtside seats and I have nosebleed seats, although we're watching the same events take place on the court, we experience them differently. You see a different game than I see, even though we're watching the same social events take place, which means that the world isn't objective, it's subjective. And if we want to get a better understanding of the world, we have to sit in many, 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 many seats. Right? We have to see the world and all the many modalities in which it presents itself, which also means that if we are sitting in many, many seats, when we go back to our nosebleed seats, if someone's like, oh, that was a foul, we go, actually, it wasn't. Actually, it was actually a pretty legit call because I saw it from a different perspective. And therefore, home gets a little different, right? Home is experienced a little differently because we have seen the world through a wider aperture and our understanding of the world has changed accordingly.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Now I can ask your I guess position on this. In terms of I guess technology. So say like when I went from Cleveland to Detroit, I had to see it in person to see how different it was. Because some people might say the Midwest is the Midwest, but when we went up to Detroit, people had the Cartier
Yeah,
glass,
the
the Pelly
buffs.
Pelly
Yeah.
boots, the minks. So I was like, wow, this is different. But it was still the Midwest feel. But now it's like you have the internet so people can see and it's kind of like the music is a little bit more blended. It's not as regional as it was, or maybe it still is like for underground artists. Like you got
Yeah.
Texas, they slowing it down. You got the West Coast sound, but now it's like kind of merging, you know.
The literature refers to this as a cultural flattening, that because we can see and experience to some degree or another, be it proxy or not, the cultural conventions of a group of people where we aren't physically there, we're now influenced by them to a greater degree than we were in the past. Music could start like hip hop's a great example. Hip hop starts in New York and then it travels to different places, but it sort of happened in waves. And in some places, drips and drops. And you have these platforms like the box, the music box, uh, with Ralph Daniels that enabled me to see what was happening in New York City while I'm sitting in Detroit and be influenced by it. But it was very much like we'll see a thing and then we'll do our take on it. But when our news feeds become the main ways by which we experience culture more broadly, the flattening happens because it's no longer so regional. Regionality doesn't even exist, right? Those false bifurcations that we call state lines no longer really matter because I experience them as if they don't exist. I experience them as if this construct has never been constructed. Therefore, it's not what I'm listening to in New York, what's happening in New York City, it's what's happening in my news feed. And therefore, it has a greater impact on me. Now, I may contextualize it based on my worldview, but when my worldview is also being flattened, we therefore, by its very nature, have a bit of homogeneity taking place, which one would say brings us closer together, but also sort of files the elbows down that makes our cultures unique in different places.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Okay, now for the culture, like how much time did you actually spend, putting this together?
Oh, I've been researching and evangelizing the thinking in the book for the last, I guess, 14 years now, 13 years now. It's been a while. So the book had been in the works without me knowing for well over a decade. Uh, when I end up getting to the writing took 18 months, is the amount of time that I had to publish the book. But at that point, it was really a sort of curating of the things I've been talking about forever. So it was an 18-month writing process of curating over 10 years of research, practice, and evangelism.
Wow, okay, okay. That's what's up. Now let me see. I can ask you about this. You did some work with the Made in America, the music festival. You can
Oh
speak
yeah,
on that a little bit. A little
yeah.
bit.
So I was a part of the agency, and I did the work to launch the Made in America Music Festival. Agency called Translation, head up by a guy named Steve Stout, who is a record label executive turned advertising executive turned music disruptor with his new platform, United Masters. Essentially, Budweiser rather came to us and said, we're dealing with an issue here that our relevance and the popular zeitgeist has waned, and our pipeline for new consumers is troubled. So the idea here is, how do we make this brand that stood for Americana isms be much more relevant today, which required understanding what Americana means today. And by exploring those meanings in a contemporary context, enabled us to recontextualize and rework Budweiser as a brand to signify something far more current, far more relevant for today's music consumers, at that time, festival goers, by creating a festival in of itself that celebrated the spirit of America, not the flag waving, I'm proud to be an American, at least I know I'm free patriotism, but instead this new idea, at least new at the time, idea of Americana, which is about the idea of pursuing the American dream. That if you have an idea, you can make it in America. And the idea of the Made American Music Festival was to celebrate that truth, that held truth, and what it means for being an American in 2012, which was unbelievably successful. It's a festival that went on for 10 years. It stopped during COVID, of course. Um, but that run was just unbelievable, and I feel very, very grateful to be able to contribute something so powerful to the practice of marketing, but more importantly, to contribute to the cultural practices of music fandom.
Wow. Okay. Okay. You mentioned Steve Stout. Big shout out. Icon in the music game.
Yeah, Stout's the man. I attribute so much of my learning in the music, in the advertising business, to Stout. He he was able to see something in me that other people did not. And not only did he see it in me, but he took it a step further and invested in me in a really powerful way. And I'm really grateful for it.
That's what's up. That's what's up. Now let me see. You did so much. You was working with iTunes and Nike Sport Music and Apple. You could speak on that.
Yeah. So before I got into the advertising business, I used to work at Apple doing partner marketing for iTunes, and I managed our partnership with Nike. And actually, my partner on the Nike side was a gentleman by the name of Omar Johnson, who went on to be the CMO at Beats by Dre. So, working at Apple at that time, this is the Steve Jobs days. We're talking 2008. It was just an unbelievable time to be at Apple, because Apple as a brand was on fire, not only with the launch of the iPod, uh, almost 9 years earlier, or 7 years earlier, and iTunes, but the launch of the iPhone the year prior, then the launch of the App Store the year that I'm there. It's just unbelievable change, and to be able to contribute a small brick on the edifice that was Apple at the time was unbelievable, and to be stewarding to some degree or another, sort of the changes that were happening in the music industry. It's just a really powerful experience for me as a young marketer, but more importantly, uh, as an idea generator, being able to be shoulder to shoulder, working with the people who were leading changes uh, that were not only disruptive but ultimately transformative.
Yeah, yeah, that was definitely a special time, especially on the Apple side. But you got to work with Google as well.
Yeah, so that was down the road. I worked with Google. I had translation on Google Play. And I've worked with Google on the academic side at Michigan, being a faculty director for our work with them, our academic programming with them. But at Wieden and Kennedy, where I was the chief strategy officer, I was able to launch uh, Google's Pixel, actually Pixel 6, sorry, Google Pixel 6, and the real tone technology, which is really about helping people feel seen. To me, another disruptive force in the mobile space, the idea that most brands were competing against megapixels when it came to their cameras. That the main differentiator in mobile devices at that time were about speed, it was about memory and camera pixelation, right? How good the cameras were. And instead of making the camera just a little bit better, Google invested in helping people feel seen, people with melanin in their skin who had normally been disenfranchised because camera technology hadn't really changed since the Shirley card. And as a result, uh, people like you and me, when people took photos of us, it wasn't representative of who we really are, right? In many ways, we weren't being seen to our full fidelity. But Google decided to invest in a technology that helped people with melanin be fully seen. And I had the great fortune, great honor to help launch that technology, which again didn't just change functionality with mobile devices. I would arguably say it had a technological change with how we think about who's worth uh, being captured with these devices in a way that was the most representative depiction of who they truly are.
Wow. Okay. That's cool. That's cool. Let me see. Okay, now you was a part of running a digital strategy for Beyonce.
Oh yeah. So that was between my Apple time and my Steve Stout time. So
Hmm.
between those two, I ran digital strategy for Beyonce during the I Am Sasha Fierce days. So this is like single ladies time Beyonce, which is great. There, I got a chance to learn how community is formed, that you don't build community, you facilitate it. You use your resources to facilitate community in such a way that people connect over shared beliefs, over shared ideologies, over shared imaginations. And in doing such, people come together and use your brand, whether you're a product, a company, an organization, institution, or in the case of Beyonce, a person, to project their identity. And as a result, not only do they feel connected, but they go evangelize on your behalf and bring other people to the fold, which for a marketer, I don't know if it gets any more compelling than that.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Now I can ask you about Now you got a partnership with LinkedIn.
Yeah, so LinkedIn and I, we worked on some research together last year, asking the question, what really drives buyability in the B2B space? Marketers typically focus on B2C marketing, business to consumer marketing, because in our minds, that's where the sexy work happens. That's where the interesting stuff happens. A lot of scholarship in the space of marketing has been focused on a consumer driven lens. And while there is some B2B literature there, it's nowhere as explored as B2C. So, LinkedIn being LinkedIn, very curious about this. And what we found is that a lot of things that drive B2B marketing are, are, are are sort of antithetical to what we think B2B marketing is driven by. People think B2B marketing is a rational buying decision, right? People buy because of its quality, its efficiency, and its price. All rational things. What we find is that it's not the case at all. Right? People buy based on emotions, right? People buy based on the social capital that they're able to achieve, not just functionality. And the same drivers that influence our consumption on the B2C side, right? What Clay Christensen would call the jobs to be done, the functional, emotional, social job, are the same levers that are at play when it comes to B2B buying, the functional, emotional, and social jobs. And the branded products that satiate those jobs the most are the ones that people are most likely to buy. And that's unbelievably powerful when it comes to the, trillions of dollars that are on the table when it comes to B2B, the B2B industry more broadly.
Yeah, yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense. Now, by you doing music and even writing, you ever consider doing maybe like documentary or film or get into that realm?
Yeah, I find that quite interesting, and it's been uh, sort of the front of my mind for the last year or so. Is that as I tell stories in prose, I tell them like through books, or I tell them on stages, tell them in classrooms. There's a medium that has scale that books just don't provide. I think about um, stories that we see on like 30 for 30 with ESPN. They tell sports stories in really powerful ways. The History Channel tells stories of history in really powerful ways. But there are business stories that have not only an economic impact, but they also have an impact on social living. They actually influence culture. These are the kind of stories I get really excited about, that I've told in different modalities, but documentaries just seem like an unrealized opportunity for the work that I do that gets me really excited about the future.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, I look forward to that. Hopefully, you know. Now, are you working on any current projects or any upcoming projects?
Yet, so I'm right in the throes of my second book. If the first book for the culture is about the culture of consumption, this next book is about the culture of work. The social forces that are at play when people engage in the collective production of output, whether it be a service, whether it be a product good, or anything in between. When we come together to create things, be it music, we come together to achieve an outcome, whether it be sport or in a professional setting or an educational setting or in an institutional setting like hospital. There are social forces that are at play that ultimately influence how we're able to get work done. And those forces have a disproportionate influence on not only how we do what we do, but what we're ultimately able to accomplish. And that, for me, is, really compelling. So I've been spending the last almost 2 years now researching this phenomenon that we call work and what it means to not only influence work, but ultimately to optimize it.
Wow. Okay. Okay. That's what's up. I definitely look forward to that. We're about 27 minutes in, so I want to thank you again for taking out the time to stop by. I know you got a hectic schedule. I know you got a lot on your plate, but it's really an honor to sit down and talk with you.
My pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity, Doc.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.